Hi, my name is Henry Benetti, and I'm a Salesian missionary priest, and I've worked most of the time in Korea, but really I was born in New Jersey and made novitiate in Newton, New Jersey, and there I think I found my true vocation, which is the missions. Actually, my Salesian vocation comes from my mother, who told me I wanted to become a diocesan priest, and she told me, "Don't you want to become a priest like Father Paul?" And Father Paul was a Salesian. So I said, okay. And at that moment, she called up Father Paul, and the next day he came over, and then I made the rest of my high school on the banks of the Hudson River in a place called Stony Point. And I enjoyed it, and I've never looked back. When I was 18, I left, and my mother and father gave me permission. At that time, we had to write a letter, and my mother received my letter asking for her permission, and she showed it to the women in the parish, and they said, "Boy, what a beautiful letter. I wish I had it now. I don't have it anymore." God must have inspired me to move my parents to allow me to go to the missions. And I think it was a great sacrifice for them too. But they thought that through that sacrifice they would be blessed too, I guess, and I would be a blessing for many other people. And I think that I have become, in my own way, a blessing for many people. I've worked in Korea since 1964. When I was 18, graduated, made 1 year of novitiate. During novitiate time, I read a book on the Vietnamese martyrs, which actually solidified my missionary experience, or my desire to become a missionary. However, what I can say is that I always was adventurous, and I always liked the outdoors. All my relatives are all hunters, and like to go into the forest and kayak and canoe and trek. People are astounded at the distances that I've walked, and we have a good constitution, I guess. Never get sick and so forth, healthy. And so I always wanted to be a forest ranger, or do something with forestry, something to do with the outdoors. I wanted to work, and I think that first desire became or solidified itself into a missionary desire. So I really never did have the chance to become a forest ranger, but I did have the chance to become something like that in the missions, going here and there, trekking here and there, and so forth. And that's the way I think my missionary vocation developed, from this desire to work in the outdoors and to be adventurous. I just like food. I don't like this food or that food, and so we can eat anything. And you have to be able to adapt and and sort of feel that you're in contact with nature, that you like everybody. Another thing is that one of the things that I've experienced, because I've worked in Korea and in China and in the Philippines, and people are basically the same. All human nature is basically the same. And there are much more points in common. One of the things that when I went to the missions that astounded me was how similar it was, not how different it was. People say there are people that get culture shocks, but for me, I never had really a shock at it being different. I was shocked that it was much more similar than I thought it would be. That's what really sort of shocked me, and it surprised me, and I thought that was pretty good. Although I must say that when I went, in the old days, when I was a young seminarian, we would send out people even to go to novitiate. Some of the guys that I worked with or I studied with were 16 and 17 years old when they came to the missions. And I did that too. But then I found that living in another culture when I was so young gave me a perspective that might be, let's say, wide, or might say Catholic. In other words, it embraces everybody. But I also found there is something lacking, and that I only found when I came back to the United States, and I studied theology in Ohio. That was when I realized what it meant to be an American. I didn't really know before. And this also, it could be a danger. So I think that we have to be a real good missionary, you have to have a sense of who you are and an identity. And it has to be solid. It has to be rooted on something. Of course, my identity might be rooted on faith. I was a priest and so forth. Yes, that's true. And I always had a positive outlook. I'm always positive. And sometimes you have to be easygoing. Sometimes people say, I'm too easygoing. They would bring problems to me. Oh, this is going to happen. These people are going to come. And I would say, don't worry, nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to happen. And most of the time, nothing really happens. Don't worry, it will pass. Forget about it. I think you have to have that type of a mentality too. But you also have to work from a sense of identity of who you are, because this is a vocation. It's not a job that you do 8 hours a day and say goodbye, and you close the door and say, now I'm here by myself and let's see, I do my own thing. It doesn't work that way. If you're a missionary, and I think everybody has to be a missionary, you have to be available 24 hours of the day to greet people, to help them in any way you can. One-on-one basis. I always say, what's the difference if you preach to 1,000 or 100 or one over a cup of coffee or tea or whatever it is? I think that it's the same thing, connecting with people. And that's what mission is. It's all connecting with people, and especially in the Orient, connections are very, very important. And I always remember Archbishop Dolan, or now Cardinal Dolan, excuse me, says this in one of his books. And I remember that too. I got the very, very similar advice from an older priest. He said when he was a younger priest and he went to say, can you give me a piece of advice for my priesthood? And this elderly priest said to him, I'll give you 3 pieces of advice. Be kind, be kind, be kind. And I think that that is one of the most important things, to be kind, to be very kind. Remember, well, Jesus is a good shepherd, kindness and so forth. We can theologize it, but just regular human kindness. And be merciful. You know, many people will say, let's say individuality. Well, I don't want people to, let's say, be using my money, or I don't want people to use me, or I don't want to be used by people, things like that. But you know, sometimes people will come to me and complain, Father, they're ripping us off, or they're stealing from us, or something. And sometimes I would tell them, you have to let it happen. You don't want to be taken advantage of, but sometimes it's necessary in the apostolate also to have that largeness of heart, to understand people and why they're doing this and why they're doing it to you. And that is also part of the priesthood, part of the missionary vocation, to be able to accept things that maybe you can't change, and things that people are doing to you, using you. One Maryknoll sister, old Maryknoll sister in Korea said, we came to give our lives to these people, and they're taking it. And, you know, it's funny things like that, but it's true. And just, let's say, go with the flow. And that's part of the vocation, just to be there for people when they need you sometimes. You don't have to be always reactive, Sometimes you have to do something for them and be proactive for them. But you must always have a positive outlook that basically the person is good. And that is where we start. That is our spirituality also. Spirituality, I'm a Salesian, a spirituality of St. Francis de Sales, which tells us that basically the human heart is facing God, is, let's say, going out towards God. And I found that even in countries which are very difficult to evangelize. I can't say much about that, but there are certain countries where you're not even allowed to preach the gospel. But I've worked there. I've worked in countries where you're really not allowed to preach the gospel. The word Jesus Christ brings you to the prison or to be expelled from the country. But you can still preach gospel values in very many ways, by the way you talk, by the way you treat people, by the way you handle situations and so forth. And I was astounded. I always heard about, let's say, the power of the gospel, but I heard it with my head. But one time in working in one of these situations for a whole year, I worked there actually for 7 years, but for a whole year we just worked with these boys and girls, and after 1 year they were changed. I was really astounded. Even I was astounded. And they went out for vacation, came back changed. And all the mothers and fathers would say, our kids are changed. What happened? Before they were, well, the school was, got some kids that were not so good and got into trouble and so forth. But there were a lot. But that doesn't matter. But the thing is, even the teacher said, all our kids are changed. What happened? And all I could say is, well, I couldn't tell them. It was the power of Jesus Christ, the power of the gospel. No. Well, it was that, but it was us as human beings going there to put a question mark. People would always ask me, why are you here? And that is the question mark that's put in the heart to make someone think further about his identity, about what he's doing, about God, you might say even. But it puts a question mark. And the only answer to that question is Jesus Christ, God. We're here because we want to show you the love of God, the mercy of God, the patience of God, the forgiveness of God, so forth. And so, forgive, be kind, be merciful, compassionate ministry. And it doesn't have to be explicit a proclamation, Jesus Christ, believe. It could be very, very low-keyed. But I find that sometimes the least pressure put on something makes much more effect, it has a greater effect than great pressure when they push back. It's just like a drop of water being very on a stone, and if it drops enough, it creates a hole in the stone. And a very light touch, low-keyed proclamation of the gospel at certain times is good. A missionary has to adapt to a situation. Some places you might be able to hold your cross in front of you and go out and say, believe in Jesus, and everybody will say yes, yes. But in other times you just have to think of gospel values and try to inculcate gospel values and change people from the inside out. Our kids are changed. What happened? Question mark. That's where we are.